The air in Willow Creek High School's staff room was thick with the scent of stale coffee and nervous anticipation. Emily Harper, a 24-year-old English teacher in her first year, sat at the edge of a worn-out couch, clutching a stack of lesson plans. Her auburn hair was pulled into a tight bun, a futile attempt to look older, more authoritative. The other teachers, hardened by years in the system, barely glanced her way. She was the new kid in their world, and she felt it. Emily had come to Willow Creek, a small town nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, chasing a dream of making a difference. She'd grown up reading books about teachers who changed lives, who turned troubled kids into poets and dreamers. But Willow Creek High was no Hollywood movie set. The school was a crumbling relic of the 1970s, its hallways lined with dented lockers and flickering fluorescent lights. The students were a mix of bored farm kids, restless troublemakers, and a few bright sparks who seemed embarrassed to care about learning. Emily's idealism was already fraying at the edges. It was a Tuesday in October when things took a turn. Emily was wrapping up her last class of the day, a rowdy group of juniors who seemed more interested in their phones than the catcher in the rye. She'd been trying to get them to discuss Holden Caulfield's alienation, but the room was a circus of snickers and side conversations. At the center of it was Tyler Grayson, a broad-shouldered 17-year-old with a permanent smirk and a rap sheet of suspensions. He was the kind of kid who could silence a room with a look, and he knew it. "Miss Harper, why do we gotta read this whiny crap?" Tyler's voice cut through the chatter, drawing laughs from his buddies in the back. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she kept her voice steady. "It's not whiny, Tyler. It's about feeling like you don't belong. Ever feel that way?" She tried to meet his eyes, hoping to spark something, anything, besides defiance. Tyler leaned back, crossing his arms. "Nah, I belong just fine. Maybe you're the one who don't fit here." The room erupted in laughter, and Emily felt the sting. She pushed through the lesson, but Tyler's words lingered. She was an outsider, too young, too earnest, too soft for a place like this. After the bell rang, Emily stayed late, grading papers in her classroom. The school was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak of the old building. She was lost in a sea of misspelled essays when she heard footsteps in the hall. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Her heart quickened, but she told herself it was just the janitor. Then the door swung open, and Tyler stood there, flanked by two of his friends, Jake and Connor. Their faces were hard, their eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Miss Harper," Tyler drawled, stepping into the room. "You're still here. Dedicated, huh?" Emily stood, her hands trembling slightly. "It's late, Tyler. You shouldn't be here. Go home." Jake, a wiry kid with a shaved head, laughed. "She's telling us what to do, Ty. You believe that?" "Shut up, Jake," Tyler snapped, his eyes never leaving Emily. "You know, Miss Harper, you're too soft for this place. Too weak. We thought we'd teach you a lesson." The air shifted, heavy with threat. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She backed toward her desk, fumbling for her phone, but Connor was faster. He grabbed it from her hand and tossed it across the room. It clattered against the whiteboard. "Tyler, don't do this," Emily said, her voice shaking but firm. "You're better than this." He smirked, stepping closer. "You don't know me." What happened next was a blur of motion and pain. Tyler lunged, shoving her against the desk. Jake and Connor joined in, their fists swinging with a cruelty that felt rehearsed. Emily tried to shield herself, but the blows came too fast. A fist connected with her temple, and the world tilted. She crumpled to the floor, her vision swimming, voices fading into a distant hum. Across town, Jack Sullivan was unloading groceries from his truck. A single dad and Army veteran, Jack was a man of quiet strength, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of a life marked by loss and duty. His daughter, Lily, a shy 15-year-old, was one of Emily's students. Jack had noticed the young teacher's passion during parent-teacher night, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about books. It reminded him of his late wife, Sarah, who'd been a dreamer too. Lily was inside, doing homework, when Jack's phone buzzed. It was a text from one of her friends, a girl in Emily's class. "Something's happening at school. Miss Harper's in trouble." Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys, told Lily to stay put, and sped toward the school. The old pickup roared down the empty streets, his mind racing. He'd seen enough in his years in Afghanistan to know when a situation felt wrong. When he pulled into the school parking lot, it was dark except for a faint glow from one classroom window. He sprinted toward it, his boots pounding the pavement. The classroom door was ajar, and he heard muffled voices, angry, mocking. Then a cry. Jack burst in to find Emily on the floor, curled into a ball, blood trickling from her forehead. Tyler and his friends froze, their faces a mix of shock and defiance. "Get away from her," Jack growled, his voice low and lethal. He was a big man, 6'2" with a soldier's bearing, and the boys hesitated. Tyler squared his shoulders, trying to hold his ground. "This ain't your business, old man," Tyler said, but his voice wavered. Jack didn't answer. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. Connor bolted first, scrambling out the door. Jake followed, leaving Tyler alone. The boy swung a wild punch, but Jack caught his wrist, twisting it just enough to make him wince. "You're done here," Jack said, shoving Tyler toward the door. The boy stumbled out, cursing, and Jack let him go. There'd be time for consequences later. He knelt beside Emily, checking her pulse. It was faint but steady. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. "Hang on, kid," he muttered, pulling out his phone to call 911. As he waited for the ambulance, he kept talking to her, his voice calm despite the rage burning in his chest. "You're gonna be okay. I've got you." The ambulance arrived, and Emily was rushed to Willow Creek General. Jack followed, his mind replaying the scene. He didn't know Emily well, but he knew she didn't deserve this. No one did. At the hospital, Emily slipped into a coma. The doctors were grim, talking about brain swelling and uncertain outcomes. Jack stayed longer than he planned, sitting in the waiting room, his hands clasped tightly. Lily arrived, her eyes red from crying. "Is Miss Harper gonna be okay?" she asked. "I don't know, kiddo," Jack said, pulling her close. "But we're gonna make sure those boys pay for this." Word of the attack spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. Parents whispered in grocery stores, kids posted cryptic messages on social media, and the school board scrambled to control the narrative. But the real storm was brewing 300 miles away, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, where Emily's mother, Margaret Harper, got the call. Margaret was a force of nature, a 55-year-old lawyer with a reputation for tearing through corporate boardrooms like a hurricane. She'd raised Emily alone after her husband died, instilling in her daughter a fierce love of learning and a stubborn streak. When she heard her daughter was in a coma, something in Margaret snapped. She packed a bag, got in her car, and drove straight to Willow Creek. By the time she arrived, the hospital was a hub of hushed conversations and nervous glances. Margaret stormed in, her graying hair pulled back, her eyes blazing. Jack was still there, talking to a police officer. He introduced himself, explaining what he'd seen. "They're saying it was just a prank gone wrong," Jack said, his voice tight with disgust. "Those kids could have killed her." Margaret's jaw clenched. "A prank? My daughter's fighting for her life, and they're calling it a prank." She turned to the officer. "I want names. I want charges. And I want to know why this school let it happen." The officer, a young man named Officer Daniels, shifted uncomfortably. "We're investigating, ma'am, but the boys are minors, and the school's claiming they didn't know about any prior issues." "Prior issues?" Margaret's voice was a blade. "You're telling me this came out of nowhere?" Jack spoke up. "Tyler Grayson's been trouble for years. Everyone knows it. The school's been letting him slide because his dad's on the board." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "As that's so." She didn't waste time. Over the next few days, while Emily lay in the ICU, Margaret became a one-woman crusade. She met with the principal, a nervous man named Mr. Caldwell, who tried to downplay the incident. "We're handling it internally," he said, adjusting his tie. "Internally?" Margaret snapped. "My daughter's in a coma because your school failed her. You're not handling anything." She dug deeper, pulling records, talking to students, and uncovering a pattern of ignored complaints about Tyler and his crew. Teachers had reported his behavior for years, intimidation, vandalism, even minor assaults, but the school had done little, cowed by Tyler's father, a wealthy local businessman with sway over the board. Margaret wasn't just a grieving mother, she was a lawyer who knew how to build a case. She filed a lawsuit against the school district, alleging negligence and failure to protect. She contacted the local paper, which ran a front-page story: "Young teacher attacked, school accused of inaction." The community was divided. Some rallied behind Emily, others defended Tyler, claiming he was just a troubled kid who needed help. Jack, meanwhile, was grappling with his own role. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but he couldn't stay silent. He testified to the police, describing what he'd seen, and started attending school board meetings, where he called out the administration's failures. His presence, calm, resolute, and backed by his military record, made people listen. Lily, inspired by her dad, started a petition among students to demand better safety measures. Weeks passed, and Emily remained in a coma. Margaret spent every day at her bedside, reading to her from her favorite books, her voice steady even as tears fell. Jack visited when he could, bringing coffee for Margaret and updates on the case. A quiet bond formed between them, two people united by a shared fight. Then, on a cold November morning, Emily stirred. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered. Margaret was there, holding her hand, whispering, "Come back to me, baby." Emily's eyes opened, blurry and confused, but alive. Her recovery was slow. She had headaches, memory gaps, and a new wariness in her eyes. But she was awake, and that was enough to fuel Margaret's fire. The lawsuit gained traction, and the school board, under pressure, suspended Tyler, Jake, and Connor. Criminal charges followed, assault and battery for all three. Tyler's father tried to pull strings, but Margaret's evidence was ironclad, and public outrage was too loud to ignore. By spring, the school was under new leadership. Mr. Caldwell resigned, and the board implemented stricter disciplinary policies. Margaret's lawsuit didn't just win, it forced systemic changes, including mandatory anti-bullying programs and better teacher protections. Emily, still healing, decided not to return to teaching, not yet. Instead, she started writing, pouring her experience into a blog that gained a small but loyal following. Jack and Lily became fixtures in Emily's life. Jack helped her navigate physical therapy, his quiet encouragement a steady anchor. Lily, who'd found her voice through the petition, started a book club at school, dedicating it to Emily. And Margaret, though she returned to Brooklyn, made weekly trips to Willow Creek, her fierce love for her daughter undimmed. The town never forgot that year. Some saw it as a tragedy, others, a reckoning. For Emily, it was both, a scar she'd carry forever, but also proof that even in the darkest moments, there were people who'd fight for you. And for Margaret, it was a reminder that no system was too big to break when it failed the ones you love.